She assumed that letting you walk away still meant she could hold the reins, not by controlling your every move. No, she wasn't that obvious. What she really aimed to control was your focus, your emotional state, and your reactions to her silence. She believed that pulling away would automatically make you move closer, that if she withdrew her attention, you'd overcompensate with more effort, more texts, more emotional investment. That tactic had always worked for her. She was sure you'd respond just like the others, by chasing harder. But this time, things played out differently. You didn't react. You didn't beg. You didn't try to convince her of your value. Instead, you stepped back. Entirely. Calmly. Without drama or the need for a final statement. And that single move, it flipped the whole dynamic. She had braced herself for a fight for control, for messy emotions, pleading messages, and the ego boost of seeing you unravel. But what she never expected was your stillness. Your silence. The way you let go with dignity and didn't need to be heard to feel seen. She thought she'd maintain power by being the one who distanced herself first. What she didn't calculate for was the sheer strength of a man who can walk away and mean it, not out of spite, but because he no longer feels the need to fight for someone who's already choosing to let go. You didn't lash out. You didn't chase a moment of clarity or cling to the hope that she'd return the same energy. You simply accepted reality without a show. And in that quiet exit, she felt the shift. The silence she expected to give her control has now become the very thing that exposes her loss. She's left realizing that the man who just calmly let go, without any need to explain himself, is now the most unforgettable version of you she's ever seen. Now she's left sitting in the silence she thought would make her feel powerful. But instead of peace, it's hitting her like a storm. It's heavy, unsettling, and deeply personal. The more she reflects, the more it becomes painfully clear. You didn't let her go because you were weak or broken. You let go because you finally stopped lying to yourself. You stopped believing that her potential mattered more than her consistency. You stopped clinging to the idea that one day, she'd reciprocate the depth and loyalty you gave so freely. That internal shift, that moment when you stopped hoping she would become who you imagined her to be, that's when everything changed. She thought ending the relationship would leave her with emotional leverage, that she could still live rent-free in your thoughts, even if you two weren't speaking. But what she never saw coming was that you weren't clinging anymore. You were outgrowing her in silence, with no need for applause or closure. And now that you're not orbiting around her anymore, now that your focus is no longer on her, but on your own growth, she's starting to feel the emptiness she thought you'd be dealing with. But here's the truth. You've already gone through it. You processed the loss. You made peace with it. You let it go and kept moving forward. Meanwhile, she's only just beginning to understand what she truly lost. That realization doesn't bring her any comfort. It brings weight. A kind of weight that settles in quietly. The weight of knowing that the one man who saw her for who she really was, who respected her without ever needing to manipulate or dominate her, is simply gone. Not missing, not hiding, just unavailable in a way that can't be undone. She might still act like nothing's wrong. You'll catch glimpses, her curated posts, the highlight reel of her nights out, the captions about healing and growth, maybe a story with friends, all wrapped in carefully crafted nonchalance. But what you won't see, what no one else sees, is the tightness behind that smile, the tension buried underneath all that performance. Because faking progress is always easier than actually moving on. And for someone who thrived on being the one in control, losing that control in silence is a brutal fall. See, it's not just you she's missing. It's what your presence allowed her to believe about herself. You made her feel soft in a world that forced her to be guarded. You made her feel safe in ways she didn't even know she craved. And now that energy, that grounded, masculine calm, it's gone, replaced by surface-level connections that never get close to touching her soul. She's surrounded by people who admire her image but never ask about the woman behind it. People who compliment her appearance but never challenge her thoughts. She's back in a world of empty attention, but the contrast is slowly killing her. Because with you, she wasn't just seen, she was understood. And that kind of presence doesn't come around often. Now that you're no longer in her orbit, she's forced to feel the absence of something real. And as she tries to replace that feeling with anything or anyone who can fill the void, she's starting to realize no one measures up. Not because you were perfect, but because you were rare. You were calm in the chaos. You didn't compete for validation. You didn't need to win her over. You simply chose her. And now, you're choosing yourself. And that's what's messing with her the most. You didn't collapse when she left. You didn't fall apart. You didn't chase. And you sure didn't try to outshine her with a rebound or some flashy post. You kept your composure. You kept your peace. You moved forward with a type of grace that's rare. And now she feels it. The difference between a man who simply wanted her and one who finally chose himself. That shift, it changed everything. Because now you've become untouchable, not in the sense of status, but in presence. She can't compete with that kind of peace. Not with another guy, not with a rebound, not with anything. Because that peace didn't come from trying to impress her. It came from no longer needing her approval to feel whole. And that's what hits the hardest. You didn't try to replace her. You didn't go out of your way to glow up just to prove a point. You didn't throw shade or post cryptic quotes. You just stopped feeding energy into what no longer fit your path. And now, without your attention giving her position in your life any meaning, she's left with one raw truth. She let go of something she never really understood. Now that the version of you who used to wait, used to hope, used to hold space for her, he's gone. Not in a bitter way, not to punish her. He just evolved. And that evolution wasn't loud. It wasn't for show. It was necessary. You found your center again. Your purpose. Your clarity. And with that came a freedom she can't follow. Not because she's not capable, but because the version of herself it would take to meet you where you are now, she hasn't built it yet. You see, she never accounted for this outcome. She assumed you'd come looking for closure. That you'd reach out for one final conversation, some kind of emotional clarity to tie it all together. But you didn't. You didn't chase after answers. You didn't ask for explanations or beg her to help you make sense of what happened. You let the silence speak, and in that quiet choice, you rose above everything she thought you'd do. That's what sets you apart. Most people get caught in that space, stuck replaying the last moment, hoping for some validation to finally move on. But you didn't need closure to heal. You didn't wait for her to wake up and suddenly become emotionally fluent. You saw that the version of her you were holding on to might have never existed outside of your hope. And that realization, that was enough to release it all. Because the kind of letting go you did, it's not rooted in ego or bitterness. It doesn't come from pretending to be above it. It comes from growing beyond the need to hold on. You didn't need to erase her memory or rewrite the story. You just stopped expecting someone who couldn't meet you to suddenly understand your depth. And in that, you became the kind of man who can't be manipulated. The kind of man who once gave everything and then walked away carrying only his dignity. And that's not just attractive, it's unforgettable. Because now she's not just feeling the absence of your love. She's feeling the loss of access. Access to your energy, your insight, your calm. The way you could make her feel safe without saying a word. And while she's surrounded by surface-level connections and empty compliments, she's starting to feel the difference. You were the one person who saw her beyond the surface, who challenged her to rise, not just be admired. Now she's learning something she never expected, that the most powerful man isn't the one who fights to stay, but the one who walks away without needing to be understood. She assumed you'd crumble in her absence. She was convinced your silence would be a temporary reaction, just a phase before you came crawling back for closure, or answers, or some form of emotional clarity. But what she didn't factor in was your ability to stay quiet, not because you were unsure, but because you were done. She didn't expect your peace to be permanent. She thought your silence was a strategy, not a destination. And that miscalculation, That's what's unraveling her now. Because when most men disappear, they leave a mess behind. They vanish with resentment, with loud exits, with bitterness clinging to every last word they didn't say. But not you. You didn't vanish to cause pain. You didn't leave to make a scene. You removed yourself with poise, with quiet assurance, with no explanations needed. No drawn-out goodbye. No emotional breakdown. Just space. Space she didn't realize would feel so final. You never begged her to reconsider. You never tossed out one last text at midnight hoping for a response. You never posted anything just to be seen. Instead, you embraced the silence she once weaponized and turned it into your shield. And that's what she didn't expect, that your absence wouldn't be noisy. It would be dignified. It would be whole. And it would be permanent. You didn't just go quiet. You became unavailable in the most powerful way possible, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And now that you're unreachable, not because you blocked her, but because you outgrew the need to be understood by someone who never really saw you, she's left with echoes. Echoes of what she overlooked. Echoes of the man she once had access to but never truly valued. You didn't retaliate. You didn't lash out. You didn't post cryptic messages to stir confusion. You just elevated. Quietly. Consistently. Completely. What she never planned for was that your silence would speak a truth louder than anything she ever tried to say. It didn't shout. It didn't need to. Because your stillness wasn't passive, it was purposeful. She thought not saying goodbye would keep a door open. But what really happened is your silence became the door. And it closed. She expected you to collapse without her, to stumble, to spiral. What she never expected was that you'd rebuild in her absence, without needing her apology, her validation, or even her presence. And the part she never anticipated? That your growth would become untouchable. Not because you disappeared in revenge, but because you stopped entertaining anything that didn't nurture your peace. You didn't weaponize your healing. You didn't try to make her feel small. You didn't post a glow-up parade to prove something. No, you simply became unavailable. Fully. In the most grounded way possible. You didn't need attention to feel complete. You didn't need her guilt to find closure. You just moved forward. And that's what's shaking her now, because you were never just another guy in her story. You were the shift, the mirror, the turning point. And she can't rewrite that. You became the lesson she can't escape. Not the one that hurt her, but the one that changed her. And it wasn't because you punished her. It's because you refused to punish yourself anymore just to stay close to someone who couldn't show up fully. You were the one man who gave her clarity without chaos. The one who remained grounded while she chased control. The one who didn't fight for her love because you knew real love never needs to be fought for. It just shows up and stays. And here's the truth that's now haunting her silently. You didn't leave her behind with bitterness. You didn't slam the door. You didn't even need to say, "I'm done." You just were. Done pretending. Done hoping. Done compromising your standards. And that quiet exit? It echoes louder than any final word she could have ever thrown your way. Now you're not just someone she used to know. You're the man who evolved in silence. Who stayed calm while everything tried to pull him off balance. The man who became a lighthouse instead of a storm. And while she might keep scrolling, keep posting, keep pretending she's unfazed, deep down she knows. She knows she didn't just lose a lover. She lost a presence, a force, a mirror to everything she wasn't ready to face. And maybe one day she'll reach out. A subtle message, a vague quote, a mutual friend passing something along. But beneath whatever surface gesture she makes, the truth will remain. She's not reaching out for you. She's reaching out for the version of herself she felt safest being when you were around. But you've already outgrown that version of her. You've already made peace with the ending. You're no longer chasing attachment. You're chasing alignment. You're no longer pulled by history. You're moved by energy. You don't need her to understand you anymore. You understand yourself. And that's the real ending. Not when she left, but when you stopped needing to be chosen by someone who couldn't choose themselves. And now she sees it. She sees that by the time it really hit her, You were already gone. Your mind had shifted. Your path had cleared. Your soul had found stillness. You didn't just move on. You elevated. And when she finally looked back, the door wasn't just closed. It was no longer there. And that silence? It's not just peace. It's power. It's presence. It's purpose. And that is what she never calculated for.